S&P staff, and that's who's missing. So.
Okay, so Mary Lou's having some audio issues, so I will get us started. First, thank you everybody for coming. I know that this is an important topic that we had arranged, and Sue Dubb is from the Uncas Health District. She is going to be our host for this evening. Sue is an RN with 32 years experience, 15 of which in public health, and we very much appreciate her taking the time to give us some information on this. So go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. So yes, this has definitely been the hot topic. And of course, the second I speak, I swear somebody watches me. Okay. It's not COVID, by the way. So, definitely been a hot topic for just about a year now. I've been kind of keeping an eye on this since the first reports came out in December of last year, December of 2019, about something going on in China, severe pneumonia. They weren't quite sure what was going on. And having been in public health as long as I have been, and having gone through the 2009 H1N1, my spidey sense, Spider-Man being my favorite superhero, was tingling that this was not going to go away quietly and that this was going to be kind of a big deal. So some of the things that we've kind of struggled with since it started has had a lot to do with messaging, communication. And I can tell you that from a long time in public health preparedness, in particular, that the first thing to go wrong in any emergency is usually communication. And this pandemic has not been any different. There's been a lot of confusion of whether we should wear masks, not wear masks, how far apart do we need to be, are we going to have a vaccine? Are we not going to have a vaccine? Is it going to be ready yet? Or is it going to be ready, 6 months from now? There's been a lot of miscommunication. Most recently, the miscommunication has been around which phases of the population are eligible to receive the vaccine. So one of our biggest jobs in public health is trying to make sure that the message is consistent to our community, because all emergencies start local and end local. So at the local public health, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. And we are the ones who are tasked with making sure that we know our communities well, know what they need, and get that need met. And in this case, it's information about COVID that affects every individual in our community and what they can do, first of all, to help themselves, but what else is available if they need additional help, and what else is available to them as far as vaccine protection and other medications. So I like to talk a lot about the rumors that are out there about the vaccine, because I know that there's a lot of conversation happening around the vaccine, particularly the two vaccines that are out there right now, the Pfizer and the Moderna. Both are using the same technology, which is called messenger RNA technology. And some of the rumors that we've heard are that it's going to go into your body and it's going to change your DNA. It does not do that. That is absolutely not true. What the messenger RNA does is it brings a message into your immune system. Your immune system has memory cells, and they're kind of like elephants. They have pretty long memories. So when that messenger goes into your cells, your memory cells, it brings a message that says, I need you to remember this, because the next time you see it, you're going to recognize it as the enemy and you're going to fight against it. So once that message has been communicated to the cell, it just sort of disintegrates. If you've ever watched any of the old spy movies where they say, here, quickly read this note, and then once you read it, destroy it, That's sort of how this works. Once the message has been delivered, it's destroyed. But your memory cells and your immune system will remember the message. So the next time it sees the virus coming in, the real virus, it will remember it and mount the attack so that the virus can't make you sick. Or at the very least, if you do get the virus, you'll have a much less serious form of the illness. So the immune system itself is pretty interesting. You know, a lot of people think that after they get the vaccine, they have a feeling of, I'm not feeling well. I feel like maybe I've got the chills, or I'm kind of achy, or I'm coming down with something, and they're convinced that the vaccine has caused their illness. And this vaccine has absolutely zero virus in it. It's all synthetically generated. There's no form of the virus in it at all. So it can't give you the illness because it doesn't have the virus to give you the illness. What those signs and symptoms are that you're experiencing are a normal reaction. It's your body's immune system saying, whoa, hold on. I'm recognizing that something's different in here, and I think we should pay attention. And so it's sort of that period of time where your immune system is recognizing that there's something in your body that's different, but it's a good different. So it has a little bit of those minor symptoms associated with it. And then once it says, oh, okay, it's not the real virus, this is just a vaccine, we're good, and it settles down and those symptoms go away. I will tell you that the reports that we've had of the folks that have gotten the vaccine to date are that the first dose, they're feeling some soreness in their arm, a little bit of swelling. There's been a lot of complaints of headache, and that's ranged anywhere from mild headache, you take a couple of Tylenol and you're fine, to a pretty decent pounding kind of headache that is concerning, but not to the point where they need to go to the emergency room. They usually need to stay home from work for a day, let the headache settle down. But we've also, and I stress this anecdotally, have heard that the people who have the more severe form of the headache are usually people who don't drink enough fluids. So we've been trying to get the message out to people, please drink plenty of fluids the day before you come, the day of, and the day after, to try and help reduce the likelihood that you're going to have the bad headache. The second dose, keep in mind that your immune system got the message the first time that this is a good message that they're getting. But the second dose, you're probably going to have a more intense reaction. Some people do, some people don't, but it shouldn't be unexpected. And by a more intense reaction, I'm saying that people may actually feel unwell enough for a day or two to actually not want to go to work. They may have a fever. They may have general muscle aches. They may have joint pain. They may have a more significant headache than they had with the first dose if they had a headache. The feeling of chills or shakes, that is, again, expected reaction from the second dose. It's usually more intense with the second dose. So again, there's no virus in it, so you can't get COVID from the vaccine. But the most important message here is that just like the flu vaccine, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not taking the flu shot anymore. The last time I took it, I got sick. Well, the vaccines only work after they've been in your body for a period of time. It takes a while to get that message out to all the cells. So when you take the vaccine, it takes about anywhere from 10 to 14 days for the vaccine to become effective. And after the first dose, it's about 50% effective. After the second dose, for the Moderna, it's about 94.2% effective. And for the Pfizer vaccine, it's right around 95% effective. But again, that's about 10 to 14 days out from the second dose. So if at any point along that timeline, you're exposed to somebody that has COVID, and let's face it, we know there's people out there that don't have any symptoms that are feeling just fine, and they're out in the community because they feel fine. They don't think anything's wrong, and they could be spreading it and you don't know that you've been exposed. So if you do become COVID positive after you've received the vaccine, unless it's well past the 2 weeks of the second dose, it is possible that you could contract COVID in that interim, but you'll probably have a less severe form of it. And if you're somebody that is at high risk, with the conditions that have been identified, cancer, obesity, diabetes, those types of illnesses that put you at higher risk, it will probably keep you out of the hospital. And for people who are less likely to have severe outcomes with COVID, it will probably just feel like a minor illness that you're down for a day or so, and then you're back at it. So those are the two biggest myths, is that it's going to mess with your DNA and you're going to catch COVID from the vaccine. So I wanted to address those right off the top. And the other thing is, everybody is concerned about how quickly this vaccine came into being. And I would say that, sure, this vaccine did come pretty quickly, but it's not because they started from scratch with this process. Back in 2002, if you remember, there was a SARS outbreak. A little bit past that, probably around 2009 to 10, right around the time that H1N1 was blossoming, we also heard of MERS-CoV, which was in Saudi Arabia. Both of those viruses were coronaviruses, which are in the same family of viruses that our COVID virus is. And SARS got the world's attention. I talked to nurses that worked in hospitals during the SARS outbreak, and it was pretty scary. Think about how far medical technology has come from 2002 to 2021. There were some pretty scared people working in hospitals. And MERS-CoV, it's kind of kept its location pretty central to Middle Eastern countries, but there's always a potential that those viruses could have taken off just like COVID did. So they had started looking at vaccine technology at the time, and the messenger RNA technology was one of the technologies that had been looked at. When COVID came along, again, they weren't starting from scratch. They had developed fairly well along the vaccine process of research and development, and said, oh, okay, well, we've got a good place to start here. And on top of that, we had all of the pharmaceutical companies coming together, all of the science world's greatest minds coming together at the same time, working collectively for the development of this vaccine, which is unheard of. As you know, pharmaceutical industry, it's very competitive. The patents and all of these things are very protected because of the fact that they spend a lot of money on research and development, and the only time they get their money back is actually when they have that patent protection. So, and it's usually about 7 years that patent lasts, and then the whole thing has to go out generically to the rest of the scientific world. In this case, we did it backwards. We said we need all the brains at the table at the same time to develop this vaccine. And so they were able to push it further. And a lot of the phase 1 and phase 2 trials had already been pretty much completed. They needed to do a little tweaking of the vaccine, but by the time they were ready for phase 3, they were very confident that they had a very good product on their hands that was essentially kind of our last hope of battling this particular virus. And the phase 3 trials, the one thing that you want to look at when you're looking at trials is the number of people that are in the trial. How broad was it random sampling? And is it double-blinded, single-blinded? In this case, you had all of the elements kind of to place. Randomized studies. They had people from across all genders, ethnicities, races. They had over 30,000 people in the sample size. They had the individuals that were getting the vaccine didn't know they were getting it. They didn't know if they were getting that or they were getting a placebo. And the people giving it didn't know if they were giving the vaccine or the placebo. So it was a double-blind study. It was randomized, and it had a lot of participants. So that weighed very heavily in getting the emergency use authorization, which is put in place for just these scenarios where you have a pandemic situation where you need to speed the process up, but be able to still do it very safely and effectively. So the Federal Food and Drug Administration put this emergency use authorization in place and allowed the ramping up of the vaccine to get out into the general public faster than it normally would, but it doesn't mean that they're not still monitoring. They've actually got a couple of great things in place to do some real-time monitoring of patients that have been getting the vaccine. One of them is a platform called VSafe. And if anyone has known somebody that's gotten their first dose, this is something that we talk about with the patients at the time that we're giving them the vaccine. And while they're in the observation area, we have them sign into this website that's part of the CDC. And what it does is it sends a message to the person each day for about 7 to 10 days initially, and then once a week. And then after the second dose, again, for the first several days, daily, and then weekly until they're about 6 weeks out. And all it's doing is, number one, how are you feeling today? Are you having any side effects since your vaccine? So not only is it asking about the big things like, did you have a really severe allergic reaction, which the person may or may not be able to answer themselves, but it's asking about things like, was your arm sore? Did you have swelling? How much swelling? Were you itchy? Did you have hives? All of those questions that further adds to the side effect profile of the vaccine. So it's a safe way to gather more information, and we've had very few people not sign into it. Right in the observation, it gives them something to do to pass the 15 or 30 minutes that they're waiting. And anyone that I've spoken to said, yeah, it takes about 3 minutes to answer the questions, and they think it's a really good idea that people are still monitoring the vaccine. The other thing that's out there is something called, for short, we call it VAERS, but it's the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. And that system has been in place for decades. What it is an online platform where either myself as a vaccinator, my patient that I give a vaccine to, or their provider can actually fill out this form that talks about a specific side effect that the person has had. And it's a little bit more detailed than the VSafe platform, in that it's looking for specific medical information. It looks for other medical conditions the person may have. It looks for medications they may be on. It asks about the date and the time that the dose was administered, how long after the dose did the side effects start. Again, very detailed reporting. Did the person go to the hospital? Did they have to get an EpiPen? So the downside of that system, unfortunately, a lot of people only fill that form out when it's a bad side effect, like somebody has a severe allergic reaction, they don't fill it out for, yes, my patient said they had a little soreness at the injection site, because most people expect their arm to be sore the next day after they've had a vaccine. So again, a lot of safety checks and balances in place, even though, you know, it's gotten the EUA authorization to go ahead and, you know, be given to the public, but people are still a little nervous, a little scared. But as a public health nurse, I read a lot of articles. I read whatever is out there. I have a voracious appetite for all of these types of articles that are out there because I want to have the most up-to-date information to share with my patient before I vaccinate them. I take that very seriously. And people are scared. We've had people that have come to the table and literally been in tears because they're so torn over whether or not they should get the vaccine, but their doctor said, you know, it's probably a good idea for you to get this because you're high risk. The elderly in particular have been very nervous and scared. Happy that they could come in to get the appointment, but you can still tell that there's that anxiety of, is this going to make me, am I going to have a serious reaction? So a lot of this has been anxiety producing for parents or adults of adult children that are coming in with their older parents are very nervous. They want their parents to have it. They're concerned about being around their older parents. And we've gotten a lot of requests, can I get it? Because I'm taking care of my mother at her home. So there's been a lot of discussion about who should get it, which we don't really have any control over at the local level. You know, there's recommendations at the federal level. The governor has his vaccine advisory committee, which has developed the phases that pretty closely align to the phases at the CDC level, but there's been a few tweaks here and there. Every state has the right to kind of send the vaccine out the way they want to or see fit to, which makes it difficult because the phase 1B initially, when it came out, there was a lot of confusion over who should be getting that, and it was almost half the population of Connecticut. And when you're not getting the amount of vaccine in order to cover that population, how do you tell one section of 1B, well, sorry, you're in 1B, but you're not in the right part of 1B. So there's been a lot of anger and anxiety over that. Right now, phase 1B that we're giving vaccine to is for 75 years of age and older. That is probably going to open up a little bit more around the middle of February. But I can tell you right now that we have 200 doses coming for this week. And there are some health districts that are getting no vaccine. So there's a big demand, but limited supply. And we're hoping that some of the newer vaccines coming down the pike are going to be approved shortly and will be able to be produced in larger numbers so that we can make it available. So some of the side effects that I talked about, that's another concern that people have. We break that up into mild, moderate, and severe. So the mild things that we talk about, and we try to educate our patients at the time we're vaccinating them, is, you know what, your arm's probably going to be a little sore for the next day or so, but we can give you things to do to help reduce that, like moving your arm around after you get your injection for a few minutes. In a few hours, take some ice in a face cloth and sort of massage the site. You may take Tylenol or ibuprofen for the soreness if it gets that bad. So those are some of the minor things. It may look a little red or pink. That's okay. It may feel like there's a little bit of a welt or a swollen area on that part of the arm. Again, those are local, expected, normal reactions that most people get. Some people have no reaction whatsoever. The biggest thing I've heard is, yeah, my arm was really sore for a couple of days. The medium or moderate things that we hear about are things like hives, intense itching, severe headache, chills, joint aches and pains, muscle aches. The really severe things that we're concerned about, number one, is anaphylaxis or severe allergic reaction. And that could be something in the vaccine itself. There's two things that are in the vaccine that are really more to help with the transport of the vaccine through the body. One of them is called polysorbate, and the other one is, for short, it's called PEG, but it's polyethylene glycol. And the one thing that you need to know about that is that if you've ever known somebody that's gone for a colonoscopy and they have to do the prep, PEG is one of the main ingredients in that. So if anybody's ever had a reaction to the prep for a colonoscopy, that's kind of a red flag to us. So we ask those kinds of questions. And polysorbate is something that's used a lot in facial cleansers. So it's an emulsifier that people will have a reaction to on their face. So if they've ever had an allergic reaction to any kind of facial cleanser, then, you know, we're a little bit more cautious with that. So for the people that have ever had a severe allergy to anything in their life that they need to carry an EpiPen for, common things are antibiotics, latex, peanuts is another common one. Those are the types of allergies that people usually have a pretty serious reaction, and they either end up having to use their EpiPen or they have to go to the emergency room because all of a sudden they can't breathe. And your body has just had this really intense reaction to something in the vaccine. I will say there's no latex in the stopper that goes in the vaccine that we put the needle through. So we don't have to worry about latex allergy from the vaccine. The other two ingredients, the PEG and the polysorbate, those are two things. If a person has had a reaction to that in the past, they usually know that they had a reaction and what it was from. So for those people that had a severe reaction, we have them wait for a full 30 minutes after they receive their vaccine. We, for safety measures, we always have epinephrine on hand. We have our observation area is staffed with nurses and EMTs. Some of them are paramedics, some of them are EMT basics, but irregardless, we all have that emergency background. Jen Ceccarelli, who works with me, and Gail Haleja, the other nurse that works with me, all three of us have critical care background. I did EMS for 15 years, I think. So we've all been there and managed those types of episodes, and we have very reliable medically trained volunteers that come into those observation areas that have dealt with allergic responses on multiple occasions. We have an EMS crew on standby at the facility so that if something does happen, they literally roll the gurney in the door, take the person, and drive down the hill from Rose City Senior Center right into the ER of Bacchus Hospital. So because I'm ultimately responsible for anything that happens in the clinic, that's my license, I want to make sure that every single person in that clinic medically, that they're trained to the level of they know what they need to know, and they know how to act, and the community connections that we have with American Ambulance and Bacchus Hospital, those things are all in place, and I feel very comfortable that if anything did happen, that individual would be taken care of very quickly and effectively. So not every clinic has that ability to have an EMS crew on standby on the property. We do. So we're very lucky to have that. There was something else that I wanted, before I go any further, I feel like I'm just jabbering on here. So if anybody has something specific about anything that I mentioned so far, please feel free to either type it in the chat or just stop me and ask your question. I think actually the only other thing that I wanted to cover was some of the considerations that have been brought up besides allergies are something called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And everybody looks at that word and goes, what is that? So it's a French term, Guillain-Barré, and it's an autoimmune disorder that actually attacks the nerves in your body. It has had some association with flu shots. It's a very, very, very low percentage of people that have had it, that it's been associated with a flu shot. It's more likely to occur after a viral infection, like a respiratory infection, or Campylobacter is a GI upset thing that happens where people have severe diarrhea from it, and it's been triggered after that. But it's usually several days or weeks after the initial infection or vaccination. So what happens is people start getting this tingly feeling in their toes, numbness, and it works from the feet up. So it can actually lead to full paralysis. I've had one patient in my entire 32 years that had Guillain-Barré that I cared for in the hospital when I worked in acute care. I've never had anyone that I vaccinated, to my knowledge, that's ever had it. But I know it can happen. And this particular individual was in a coma for about 3 months and completely recovered. Actually remembered conversations that we had, repeated them back to me about things that I had said while I was in the room caring for him. So people do recover from it. Some people recover quickly. Some people, it's a lengthy recovery with a lot of physical therapy afterwards, but it can happen, but it's incredibly rare. And then the other thing that can happen is something called Bell's palsy. And that is when the facial nerve is affected. And what will happen is one side of the face will kind of look like it can't smile. It's just in a permanent fixed position. The eye may stay open, not be able to tear properly. And again, oftentimes it's verbal and the person recovers and they have no residual. Other people do have some of the paralysis that remains, but it's not as intense as when it first happened. Common treatments for that are like prednisone, steroid type therapies. And again, like Guillain-Barré, incredibly rare that it happens. And the only other thing that people are concerned about when they get vaccines is there preservative in it? These two vaccines do not have preservatives in them. So, because most people are concerned about the type of preservative, and they think that it's a form of mercury, and it's actually not. So I think that's pretty much all of the points that I wanted to cover. I will say that the phases information is on the ct.gov website, and they're usually updating that information pretty regularly. The other place to get that information almost as quickly is the governor's updates that he does usually at 4 p.m. Pretty much on a daily basis. But that is pretty much, I would say, just get your information from a reliable source. The CDC is a great place, Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins website, National Institute of Health. All of those are great sources of information. And did I forget to mention your local public health nurse? Because that's what we do too. So let's see. If someone was to have a severe reaction, typically how soon would that take place? Great question. So the answer is it depends. Some people will react to, I mean, you literally still have the needle in their arm and they just go down. Other people, it can be a couple of, like an hour or so after. Most people, though, fall in the range of having that happen within the first 5 minutes up to about the first 30 minutes, which is kind of why we did the 30-minute wait time for anyone that might be considered a high risk for an allergic reaction. I think the other thing that should be mentioned here is sometimes the anxiety that people have just over getting a shot Not, it doesn't matter what's in the shot. It's the shot that people are nervous about. And sometimes people just faint. I had a girlfriend who every time the dentist lifted the Novocaine needle to numb her up would pass out, just out cold. And it was just her extreme fear of needles. So we always keep that in the back of our mind too. It's not always a severe allergic reaction. Sometimes people just faint. And sometimes we can see that coming. They usually get very pale, very sweaty. They kind of get a blank look on their face, and we can help lower them down quickly and get cold cloths, put their head between their knees, all those good old-fashioned things that your mother taught you to do. We can do that. So sometimes it's trying to figure out, is this really an allergic reaction, or is this somebody that just got so worked up that they passed out? So, but that was a great question. Do you recommend people with compromised immune systems or taking immunosuppressants to get it? So another great question. I actually am personally seeing my physician on today's Monday, Wednesday afternoon, because I take medication for an autoimmune disorder that I have. Granted, it's not severe, but I do have to take medication time and when it flares up. So the question is the vaccine as effective as it is for people who are not immunocompromised? And my understanding from having previous conversations with my own physician is that sometimes because your immune system is suppressed, it doesn't always get the strongest message from the vaccine, that your response to the vaccine may not be as effective as somebody who does not have immune compromise, but it doesn't mean that you get no benefit from it. So some people, like me, have the ability to come off my medication for a period of time. In my particular case, if I'm off my medicine for a week, get the vaccine, and then I stay off my medicine for 2 weeks, then I'm sort of in the same boat as anyone who is not on that kind of therapy. So I think in general, the question is, does the immunosuppression affect the vaccine effectiveness? Probably, but does it rule those people out from getting it? No. It's still recommended that they get it because they're going to get some protection. And it may mean the difference between being hospitalized or not being hospitalized. Any other questions?
I have one more question. If people get the second set of the vaccine and now we're 14 days out from there, are you saying somebody won't test positive, or they still could test positive at that point?
So from everything that I've read so far, they could potentially, and I'm thinking this may be more the folks that are immunocompromised would be more likely because the vaccine may not work as strongly for them. But in the first part of it, initially, especially after the first dose, there is a pretty decent potential for them to still get the virus, even though they've gotten one dose. After the second dose, it's less likely. And again, the vaccine after the second dose is about 95% effective. Nothing is 100%. So unless you can say absolutely for sure 100% this person is protected, there's always that 5% or 6% that could potentially still test positive. But again, the important message is that even though they test positive or could test positive, they're going to have a less severe course of illness, and it will likely make the difference as to whether or not they're hospitalized or not.
So would those individuals follow the same protocol, though, in terms of still quarantining and everything?
If they test positive for the virus, yes.
Okay.
Because if you've got the virus, then you're capable of transmitting it to others. And that actually brings up a really good point, because one of the common questions that happens, and it's actually coming up more frequently now that we're actively vaccinating people, is once you have your vaccine, your full series, you've got your 2 shots in, you've done your 2 weeks after your second shot, is it then okay to go out and hang out with family, friends, get together like we used to? And the answer is no. And the reason for that is we don't know, while we know it can protect you, we don't know if the person vaccinated can still be a carrier of the virus and give it to other people. So they're doing a lot of research on that as we speak, because again, we don't know how long the vaccine is going to be effective. That's one thing. We don't know if the person who's vaccinated could still be a carrier of the virus and pass it along to others, themselves are protected from it. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And unfortunately, until we get a lot of people vaccinated and are able to kind of look at the data, it's going to be a while before we have definitive answers to those questions. I will say that and some recent questions about the new variants of the vaccine and whether or not, or of the virus rather, the British variant, and there's a South African variant. There's not as many cases of that here in the United States. There's a few cases of the British variant. We've had a couple cases here in Connecticut. Right now, it appears that the vaccine is effective against that particular variant. The British variant, we were told by Dr. Matt Carter, he is the state epidemiologist, and the way he explained it to us on the local health call is that the British variant is more efficient and it binds more efficiently to the cells in our body, so it's easier to transmit. It's becoming it's about 1.5 times more infectious than the garden variety original COVID virus that's out there. I haven't heard too much about the South African variant. I don't think there's any cases of that here in the US. I think that's more of a problem in Africa and Europe, but I haven't seen a lot of information on how effective the vaccine that we have right now is against that particular variant. But my understanding from Dr. Carter is that the one we have right now, the vaccine that we have right now, is effective against the British variant. Any other questions or concerns? Are you hearing from your clients concerns, their kids, or I know that there's a lot of multi-generational families in our area, and that has been an area of concern of ours, because with the quarantine and isolation requirements, oftentimes there's so many people in the home that it's physically impossible for them to separate appropriately in order to successfully quarantine and isolate. And, you know, trying to manage that has been a challenge. But did somebody have a question?
Does anybody have any other questions? Sue, we want to thank you so much for taking time to do this for us. We really appreciate it. And we will be able to get the recording in another language and out on our social media posts. So hopefully a lot more people will get the information needed so that we can help in your effort to get as many people vaccinated as possible.
Absolutely.
Super helpful, Sue. Thank you for your time and all that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Knowledge, you know, it just kind of helps with the anxieties that lots of us might be feeling. So
yes. Helpful. Well, like I said, a lot of the information is on the CDC website. That's where we get our information, and the state health department There's some really great infographics on the CDC website that are in multiple languages. And the Mayo Clinic is another terrific resource that has a lot of publications that are in multiple languages. The one language that I will say is hard to come by is Haitian Creole. But we've asked repeatedly for assistance with that. So I think there's going to be some materials coming out on that.
So that's awesome, but having it down on a local level like we've got. So Mary Lou, Deb, Sue, you know what I mean? Bringing it right down to local that we know you, Sue, just is comforting in a different way. So thanks for everybody who was involved.
Well, it's definitely a team effort, that's for sure. And the community resource coordinators have been a godsend in all of this. And now we have the COC program. It's just everything is kind of falling into place, and we're able to be much more effective in. So I'm only laughing at the light flashing because on the last webinar that I was on, I was doing a training with nurses, and my husband walked in behind me with a face mask that looked like a haunted figure. I'm like, I can't. This is why I come upstairs. I never know when somebody's going to walk by. But yeah, the having those local community resources, and having been in the community now for like 6.5 years, I've gotten to know all of you very well, and you all know that you can pick up the phone anytime and call me. So whatever we can do to make it work, that's what we'll do. And I have 2 nurses to help me now, Jen and Gail. So they're also incredibly knowledgeable and are happy to answer questions for folks as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your interest and your commitment to the community. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.